Welcome to the Alphalist podcast. I am your host, Toby. Alphalist is a closed community with over 400 CTOs who share their knowledge and experience in a Slack space and at events. With this podcast, we want to give our members and interested parties insights into the thoughts and ideas of top CTOs. If you're interested in becoming a member of the community, please visit alphalist.com to find out more on how to apply. Sastrify is the agile SaaS procurement solution for progressive tech companies. Value proposition is reducing your SaaS spend and save time to let you focus on the essentials. Sastrify's SaaS experts negotiate with SaaS vendors such as Google, Miro, Asana, Salesforce or others the best conditions for existing contracts as well as for upcoming renewals. My company OMR is a customer of Sastrify and saves us many hours of work and reduces the SaaS spend significantly, for instance. Other large customers to mention are Gorillas, Rantastic, Westwing or Emma. Sastrify's promise is they save you more money than they cost. Special offer, which is only valid until the end of the year, is a 50% discount for the first 3 months, and you can claim it on sastrify.com/alphalist. Welcome to the Alphalist podcast. I am your host, Toby, and today with me is like a quite famous guy who's in a way, from my perspective, like a hidden champion of the German tech ecosystem. Tech meaning engineering. He's really deep down and dirty, I would say. It's the former CTO of Rocket Internet, the co-founder of Spryker, and now he's busy with ROQ.tech, and he's going to tell us a bit about that. It's Fabian Wesner. Welcome to the podcast. He just received, I think, 10 million in funding last year, and we are quite curious what he's up to. Fabian, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Toby. Nice. Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you.
So, can you tell us a bit more about your journey you went through? It's quite an amazing journey that, from my perspective, is very rare for a techie in Germany.
Yeah. When I tell about my own journey, I usually start 2010, so like 10, 11 years ago. At that time, I was hired by Rocket Internet. So before that, I was a freelancer doing software engineering for larger companies, and I looked into my future career path, and I wanted to become a CTO at some point of time. And Rocket Internet contacted me, and they told me, hey, you can work for us, and then you can become a CTO in one of our startups. So they offered me a really, really good career perspective. And I didn't know about Rocket Internet before, so I was aware of them. At that time, they were quite small, just did a few companies like Zalando and Home24, and the older ones will know about this. And yeah, that's what they actually did. So they offered me a career perspective, and I joined Rocket Internet, worked for Zalando for half a year. My first job.
Was it Oliver Samwer who contacted you back then? And did he promise you shares in one of the startups, or how did that work out?
No, it was Benedikt Franke. He was entrepreneur in residence before he became founder of Helpling.
Okay.
And I did the job interview with Frank Biedke, who was the technical managing director of Rocket Internet and also of Zalando.
Because I actually sat there like in the first Rocket Internet office, and Oliver Samwer was telling us, like as a team, Philipp, Christian, and me, okay, come to Berlin. We just found something cool together, and you just have time. Like at a certain moment, I call you, and then you just have time to buy boxer shorts and get a flat here and come over. I promise you that. He was like absolutely on fire. That's why I mentioned that.
Actually, Oliver did not talk to techies at that time. So at that time, there was he had Frank doing this. And,
okay.
So I worked for Zalando for 1 year. My first job, I joined a few months, actually 2 months before Christmas, and my job was to replace the Magento checkout for Zalando in like 6 weeks before Christmas. That was quite a lot of responsibility. And yeah, it happened. It was quite good. So during Christmas and New Year, I received exceptions via email. So I was able to see what's going on in the shop and fix bugs. It was a very interesting time. Zalando at that point was still small, to a few thousand orders per day. And I was able to look into code, to make deployments. I was quite empowered. Then my next job, I was a team lead when we realized Zalando Lounge. This is a shopping club of Zalando. Not sure if it's still a thing. And then after 1 year working for Zalando, I became CTO. But I did not become CTO of a startup. What I expected, I became CTO of Rocket Internet. That was because the IT team of Rocket was very small at that time. I think it was only 12 people in the PHP team and a few more in the Java team. The Java team had his own CTO, Florian Brick, and that team was busy building Groupon and CTD. So there was only these 12 guys and myself, and Oliver had very big plans. The plan at that time was to build eCommerce shops all over the world. So to replicate the success of Zalando in other regions. So when I started when I came back to Rocket, my boss, that was Christian Weiss, the managing director, told me, hey, you have 4 weeks of time to launch the first shop in Japan, actually. And if you do it, you get 5,000 euros bonus. So I had a goal. I had to launch a shop. I had an incentive, like 5,000 euros in 4 weeks bonus. Good, very happy. And and everything else was up to me to decide. So I created a team, sent some people over to Japan, working with the local team. And then after 4 weeks, of course, we launched a shop based on Magento. And then 4 weeks later, we launched the next shop in Brazil. That one is still existing. It's called Dafici. It's a very, very large e-commerce player. And then a few weeks later, we launched another shop in Russia called La Moda. It's also still there. The Japanese shop is I think it's still there, but not owned by Rocket Internet anymore. It's called Locondo. This one I think is gone because at that time there was the big earthquake and tsunami, and I think the warehouse was affected. So the entire it was at that week. They booked TV commercials. They spent a lot of time, and then the earthquake happened, and then everything was broken. So I think the focus moved away from the Japanese shop.
And how did you? I mean, being a CTO of a company builder, how did you structure the teams? I mean, was there a tech team for each of the shops? How was it structured?
I mean, all of this happened in the first months. So I had my initial team, and I hired a few more developers, and it was mostly ad hoc management. There was just not enough time to build a proper IT organization. So we just had a big task force team, and we did what was needed, what was actually needed. And
so only a central team then? Only
a central team, yeah.
Okay.
I also had people on ground in Japan when the earthquake happened. That was very bad. It was the worst time of my career. So I was very happy when I got the team back then after 2 days. And then I had the chance to replace Magento with our own system. When I decided to use Magento, I did that because I know that with Magento we can build a shop very quickly, but it will not scale. So I was aware of this because of my experience from Zalando. So nobody actually cared for what I was doing there. So what I said is, okay, Magento is a good starter, but we will replace it. We implemented the entire business logic into our own code base. That was called Bob. So the project was called Bigfoot, and Bob was Bigfoot's own backend. And so we had Magento and Bob in place. So Magento was in its raw state, and Bob contained all our code. And then over time, we also implemented a front end. It's called Alice. So we had Alice Bob. And Alice is a very lightweight framework based on PHP framework. Bob was based on Sand framework. And then with this two applications, so front and back end, we replaced the Brazilian Magento that was used for Dafici. The Russian one, we had no chance to replace because the Russian CTO decided to move away from Rocket very quickly. So I was able to realize my first own shop system. It was nice.
And did it make sense from your today's perspective? I mean,
it totally makes sense. At that time, we struggled a lot with the technology in Brazil because there was no AWS available. So we need to decide either we host in US and then have a very low latency to South America, which we tried it out, but it was not working well. Or we use a local hosting provider, and that was super expensive. And Magento is very slow. So the monthly bill for hosting was 5 digits. And with the new Alice Bob system, everything was so much more lightweight. So the bill, the invoice for hosting dropped a lot. The system was much more snappy, and usability increased.
And could you just use just asking critically here, couldn't you just have used CDN or something in between, or was that just not existing back then?
Yeah, a CDN doesn't really help for, a CDN for the static assets, of course, we had that. But for the dynamic content of a shop, that doesn't help, right? Because every customer sees a bit different content, right?
If you have state, if there is already a state, then
there was state. Yeah, there was state. And so this was one part of my job to build a proper architecture. I think that went quite well. The other part of my job, to come back to your question, was the IT organization. My own organization was that task force team. We grew that to, I think, 45 people at that time. And then in parallel, I hired the lead engineers for the project. So we hired a CTO for the Japanese shop, Locondo. I hired a CTO for La Moda, for Russia. And I hired, we didn't find a CTO, but we found quite good tech leads for the Fiji at that time. At La Moda, it happened. So I interviewed the CTO, and we had them on ground in Berlin. We trained the CTO, and at the moment when he came back to Russia, he decided he cuts relationship to us. So he doesn't want to deal with the Germans anymore. That was also a surprise for me, also learning effect, that when you build teams and make them independent, then they may act just on their own. So
very independently.
To manage them, yeah. And that was actually the goal. The goal was to kickstart these companies and then to make them independent. There was never an idea to have some software as a service like architecture operated by Rocket, because the idea was make them independent, that they can grow independently, and then also that the companies can be that you're able to sell the companies independently, which would not be possible if they all operate on Rocket Internet infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So from architecture point of view and from organization point of view, we need to make sure that we isolate them very quickly, even if that means that there are no synergy effects, because you cannot share features among them because they are all a bit different.
But the initial core was still Alice and Bob, and they used that. Was it possible for them to update from version to version? Okay,
there was no update concept.
That's an honest answer.
Yeah, but it was not part of the strategy.
Yeah, and
then when this was done, there was this very interesting time when Oliver decided to build a lot of shops. So first we had these 3 shops. We had half year time, and then there was another half year where I had to launch 1 shop per week. So in this, I did. We created the architecture was prepared for this. So we had different versions of Alice and Bob. One for fashion, one for furniture, one for toys, one for wholesale, and then we had different country setups for Brazil, for Japan, then for India, for Middle East, for Australia, and then we combined these. And so we had, I had 3 teams. Each team was like 6-8 engineers working in parallel, building 1 shop. We had a bell in the office, so when a shop was launched, we used the bell. So we ring the bell. There was a sound in the office, and then we created some kind of Kanban mode. There was a station for designers. There was a station. My current co-founder, Tim, he was also there at Rocket Internet at the time, and his job was to fly to all these countries and to prepare the founders and tell the founders, hey, in 5 days, Fabian will come, and until then, you have to have the product data prepared, and you have to have the images prepared, and you need to know your requirements and which payment provider you use, because our focus on each of these companies was only a few days. They prepared everything. Then we came with our team. We put together their stuff. So we took actually the Brazilian shop, copied over to and used the Australian, put it in Australia, put their logo in there, replaced the Portuguese language with English language, plugged in a different payment provider, and this took only 5 days. The functionality was the same. And this way we launched, for example, the Iconic in Australia, which is also still existing and still big. And that was really interesting time. Very, very fun time for me as CTO. I learned a lot, but it was a big mess.
Did you sleep a lot?
When I came to the office in the morning at 8, then the people from Australia and Japan, they waited for me. Hey, why are you so late? We want to talk to you. And in the evening, when I wanted to leave my laptop at 9 p.m., then the people in Brazil waked up and said, no, you cannot leave. We want to have a meeting with you. I was younger, so it was not a big deal for me. Really amazing time. My own team at Rocket Internet was around 100 people. And then I hired all the CTOs and local teams. We had more than 1,000 people in total. I know this number because at that time, we used Atlassian Cloud, and 1,000 was the limit. So we reached the limit of Atlassian products. And then I also had a big problem how to deal with that. So it was very, very effective. So we launched a lot of shops. It was not very efficient because we did not have any synergy effects, nothing. We just did everything in parallel and twice. It was a little bit of a mess because there was no update parse. There was no way to share features. And founders talked to each other. So one founder said, hey, we have that nice feature. Can we just give it to you? But then the code did not fit because it's different versions and different.
I guess that was also still the time of Subversion and so on, right? There was no Git, so it was actually harder to. Wow.
Yes, yeah. It was. I was CTO of Rocket only for 12 months, and all this happened in these 12 months. Very amazing time.
Is there any before you continue? Is there any like absolutely funny Oliver Samwer anecdote you can tell us?
Oh, I have several anecdotes. I'm not sure if I want to tell them.
I mean, the Blitzkrieg email is kind of very well known, but anything maybe funny related to tech?
I also received that Blitzkrieg email. There were different versions of that email, and I received the one for furniture, and I was very happy that the one which was published was not the furniture one. So I was never actually. Nobody ever thought that I could have published this email, because I received a different one. That was quite. Yeah. Oli was extremely active at that time and very, very proactive. He was always nice to me because I was his CTO. So there was also there was some kind of very interesting talks with the founders, but it was always nice with me. So I always got nice phone calls, and there was never any problem between us. So
no shouting at night or anything.
Yeah, I think he did know that it's not a good idea to shout at your CTO when you fully depend on him. I think that would be a very bad idea. So we had a good relationship. Yeah, but still, it was a surprise. I mean, when you get a phone call, you had to take it, no matter what you're doing right now. So it was also something I didn't have before.
Interesting how much respect.
I have one anecdote. At
okay.
Least. So one of tech leads. He went to the toilet. Then Oli called him. He didn't take the phone. Then Oli called me. Hey, I want to talk to him. No, Oli, but he's on toilet. No, that doesn't matter. Bring him the phone. So I had to go to the toilet and bring him the phone. Yeah. There was just he was not very patient actually when things happened. I also, because we launched a lot of shops in parallel. A lot of companies, so he had to deal with hundreds of founders, and of course you cannot be patient. I mean, you have to work very, very quickly and very proactive. And if something forces you to make a pause, this is not acceptable. So I totally understood that problem that he faced and supported it. So yeah, that was my job.
Did you learn any of his let's say leadership ideas? Did you adopt any of those leadership ideas? I mean, he's like kind of like the pushiest person I've ever met, I think. Did that somehow?
Of course, everybody's doing that. So everybody working with him doing that. So I tried to avoid some bad habits. A lot of founders used him as an argument. So we need to do that because Oli said so. This is something which I never did. This is something which I dislike. So usually that if somebody tried to do that with me, I always stopped. No. But of course, you start using some habits. For example, I started to write my emails very short, without saying hello, without saying best regards, just one sentence emails. And also started some workshops without anything except the content itself. The Brazilian guys called me then the tank, the German tank. I think afterwards I reflected this and I started to turn back to my normal mode, how I should communicate. So I think it was not healthy for myself, because that was not me. So for Oli, it's fine. Everybody has very high respect, but it did not fit to me. But yes, of course, I started to take over some habits.
Okay,
as everyone.
But you're not a tank anymore. So
not a tank.
No question mark emails.
One founder tried to push me to do something, and he put a fake email of Oliver Samwer on CC. So the pressure on the founders was quite high, and then people behave very, very unfriendly. Okay. But it was still fun. For me, it was fun because I was not really. I was accountable for a lot of stuff, but I was not really. There was no way to make pressure on me. I did not have shares, so there was nothing that somebody could take away from me. That's why for me it was not a big problem. It was very fun. But still, from an architecture point of view, it was a big mess that we created. And my successor, Ronny Redner, had to fix it for a long time. But for me, when there was a chance to move to Project A, to become CTO of Project A, to leave the mess behind, that was a good offer, which I accepted after 1 year.
You and Florian as well, right? You were both
Florian as well,
CTOs.
yeah. My Java co-CTO. We both decided to go to Project A, so we decided to move from company builder Rocket Internet to, at that time, company builder Project A. So to go also with our friends, because like people like Christian Weiss, Florian Heinemann, Uwe Horstmann, they all switched over to Project A. So it was while on Rocket, nobody left. Nobody stayed. None of our friends stayed. So it was an easy decision for us to go over. Yeah. Of course, Oli made good counter offers, so I needed some time to think about this. But it was the decision that let's go with our friends to Project A, which I think was a good decision at the time. So I became CTO of Project A, and I had the chance to build a shop system again. So at Rocket, I had the chance to build a shop system, Alice and Bob, and at Project A, I got the very unique chance to build this shop system again. So because it was clear that we wanted to do e-commerce, not the same bullish way that Rocket was doing, but in a more thoughtful way. But it was clear that we need a shop system for sure. So we do not want to go with Magento. We want to have something on our own stack. And with all my learnings from Rocket Internet, I implemented another shop system. In the first weeks, we needed to decide about the name. So at Rocket, it was called Alice and Bob. So the first letters of the alphabet. At Project A, we decided to use the last letters of the alphabet, and we called it Eve and Set. Eve and Set also fit quite nice to the frameworks. So Eve was implemented on the Ye framework, and Set was implemented on the Cent framework. So there's some fit to the names, Eve and Set. We had more time to build the framework itself. We had time without project pressure to think about the proper architecture. So we realized a good piece of software. It's still in use by some companies. And with this new shop system, we launched some shops. Not sure if there's something that is famous. I think there was Tirendo. That's a shop for tires. It's not there anymore. They had a TV commercial with Sebastian Vettel. Then there's Nutri. This shop is still there. And we had a shop in US called Saatchi Art. That was a shop selling artworks globally. It was a very interesting business model. Yeah, so we launched a few shops. I think the most famous one is Contorion. It's a shop for MRO. And it was also a huge success for Project A. I think when they sold the company for a lot of money.
Yeah, that's what I heard. And then all based on your infrastructure. So, and besides that, did you have, Project A also did like quite a lot of venture deals. Were you involved there too, or?
Let me explain my role at Project A. So my role was, I was the CTO of the PHP team, and with a focus on eCommerce. And we created companies from scratch. So I was there like as an interim CTO, working together with the founders. And then my job was to build the initial setup and to hire a CTO and to train the CTO. We also had an internal CTO candidate program. So we trained our own CTOs and then promoted them for startup CTOs. This went quite well, but I was very limited to a small set of the portfolio of Project A. Project A invested money into startups and also into bigger companies. And these companies are not necessarily doing e-commerce and not with PHP. And that's why I did not qualify for most of the portfolio companies. So if you're doing ad tech based on Scala, then I was not able to help. It was not my technology. It was not my domain. My framework didn't fit. So, and then when Project A moved away from company builder more to being operational VC, that means there are no greenfield project anymore. It's more that Project A invests into existing companies and then helps. This makes totally sense with marketing and BI, but it did not make sense for my role and for what I was doing.
At least not if you're so hands-on, right? Then you have to step back and have to optimize, AWS cloud costs and stuff like that, or build central things and then integrate those in the startups. But I guess that potentially doesn't make sense because you're too slow then, right? If startup adopts your technology, let's say you're building like an authentication service, doesn't make sense, right?
It was, I think that doesn't make sense. I think you need, my successor, Stefan, he's much more, he's not focused on e-commerce. He's more broader. He's more broad technology knowledge, and he feels more like a consultant. So he helps the startups to make good technology decisions. He's also building stuff. He's also hands-on CTO, but he's a much better fit to what Project A is doing now than what I was, because I'm a hands-on CTO. I want to focus on e-commerce. I want to leverage that skills, and there was just
digging in the dirt, right?
Portfolio companies. So I was not the right person for that job anymore, which was obvious. But in the same moment, there was a new initiative, which then resulted in Spryker. So Project A had this own shop system, and the shop system was also part of the assets of Project A. So Project A needed to show its own assets. And there's not much that Project A owned except of the people. And that's always said, our e-commerce platform, that's our asset. And also when companies like Dorendo and Cotorion were sold, then also the e-commerce platform was one of the assets because there's not much more assets. And that means this e-commerce technology became quite, I don't want to say popular, but it became important. And this resulted also in bigger companies asking Project A if they could also use this e-commerce technology. And that was not possible because the technology was not an enterprise product. There was no good documentation. It was not flexible enough. Also, the deal structure didn't fit. Project A wants to invest money and then sell companies. It's not an agency that can help large companies to improve their IT department. So there was never a deal. I was involved into some of these negotiations with very, very large companies, but they all failed because it just does not make any sense for Project A to do this. But there was demand. So obviously there was demand in the market for such kind of e-commerce technology. So it seems like existing solutions like Magento, Hybris, Demandware are not enough. So people are looking for something else, something fresh, something better. And they thought that our technology is exactly this. This was one of the reasons why Project A was willing to fork their own technology into a startup, which was called Krullo in the beginning, and then renamed to Spryker. And this was one of the ways. This was one of the directions how Spryker was created. There's also other stories. So if you ask Alexander Graf and Flo Heinemann, there are also other things. But anyway, there was the initiative that the e-commerce platform should be forked. And initially, I was thinking how we do that and which CTO could fit into that role. So I was helping this new startup from Project A point of view. And then I was thinking, the idea actually in my head was created. Why should I mean, if I don't have a job at Project A and they sell my baby now, why? I mean, maybe that's a good chance to become a founder again. So I was a founder before, like 2005-6, failed with my own idea, it did not work out. Then this was my chance to become a founder. It was a really cool chance because the idea was there. There were capable founders in place already. I mean, Alexander Graf has a blog, Kassenzone. I mean, I think you know, most people know. There was also an obvious marketing channel. Nils Seebach had the right context to potential investors. So there was a setup. My technology already existed, and I'm the expert. So there was a setup which was very, very. There was also money because Project A invested money. So there was like a very perfect setup, and I just had to say yes to this setup. That's what I did actually. So I said yes. I will stop working for Project A and become. Co-founder of Spryker. The term co-founder is not correct because I joined 3 months after the company was created. So I'm not really a founder. I'm more a CTO with shares. It doesn't matter, but I'm not really a founder. So like in the shareholders agreement, I'm always declared as something else. However, so I joined Spryker.
Late co-founder, I would say. Late co-founder.
Late co-founder, yeah. And then also another co-founder joined, Boris Lokshen, who's now the one operating the company. So I joined Spryker. And I continued to do what I did before. So I implemented my third shop system. It was based on if and Z. These names are still there. So in the code, you still find the names if and Z. They're not used anywhere in marketing, but I think they survived. So if it's a front end, Z is the back end system. We needed to refactor the system a lot. We also need to write a lot of documentation and make sure that we looked into topics like how exactly should we define code quality? So the goal was to build something with a high code quality, and then we ask ourselves, what is good code quality? It didn't matter before. So when you launch shops very quickly, code quality is not an important thing. But now it was important because the code was part of our offering, and it needed to be very good. So, and what does it mean? What is good code actually? So we looked into these things. So I read books, clean code, of course, solid principles, packaging principles. We did trainings with the entire team because nobody was really expert in all these topics. And then we had to answer all these hard questions. I mean, when you build such a platform, you have to think about the functionality. So you need checkout, discount, catalog, etc. But you also need to think about topics like multi-currency, multi-country, multi-locale, multi-warehouse. What exactly is a stock? Should it be an integer or float? And so on. And you need to think about security, high availability, scalability, performance, all these things. And
you built that as a framework, right? So you can essentially download the software. You get like a package from Alexander Graf, and you download it then, and then you can build your own tech on behalf of it. And it's not cloud software, right? It's
at that time it was on-premise software, so the code is public. Everybody can look at the code. It's not open source. We call it open code. The code is there. Everybody can install it. You don't need to get access, but it does not have a MIT license. So it has a proprietary license. It says you can try it out for some days, but if you want to use the production, you have to pay. Interesting. There's no term for this, so that's why we called it open code. The hardest challenge at the time was to think about the extensibility. So how can people use it, adopt it to their needs, but still able to do updates? This was something which Magento was not able to do. Mm-hmm. And this was one of the goals which I wanted to solve. We solved it with a lot of design patterns. So with a plugin system, with a dependency injection system, with factories, with all this stuff, we solved it in the code that you can extend the system from the outside. And then we implemented the application in a way that is not a monolithic, it's a modular application. So it consists of a lot of modules. At the moment, it's more than 1,000 modules in total. And each module has its own version number. And then this way, customers can decide which modules they want to use and which modules they want to replace. So you can hack the system. When you hack the system by overwriting modules, you are still compatible with the rest of the modules. Of course, it's more complicated because we talk about semantic versioning and we're talking about a very large dependency graph, which we visualized also, and a lot of constraints, but it's possible.
Database,
it's simple.
Database state in the database and migrations and so on.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, also this database model is also extendable. So we use XML to describe the database, and then customers can write their own XML. There's all XML files merged, and then the schema is created from these merged XML files. So Spryker is extremely flexible in these perspective. At that time, it was on premise. People struggled also usually with hosting. This was the biggest pain point, I think, and that's why now Spryker in the last years moved to become more. So Spryker it's now a cloud platform. So that means current customers of Spryker do not need to operate it on their own anymore. So Spryker is operating it. This is the current model. But at that time when we started, it was always like, here's the source code, have fun to install it. And it's a large system. So you have to deal with a lot of technologies. And yeah, people struggled. It did not work out well. And this whole topic is solved now, and solved in a very, very well way based on AWS. And yeah.
This podcast is proudly sponsored by Bechtle. Bechtle opens its IT online shop to all B2B customers. Small and medium-sized enterprises, as well as self-employed people, benefit from Bechtle's entire experience and can conveniently procure their IT online. They offer total IT procurement in one place, and that saves time and money, special functionality for business customers, employee management with budget limits or approval processes directly on the platform, best prices for all brands and fast delivery. If you want to try it out, simply go to bechtle.digital and use the coupon code alphalist on your first order to save some money. So my friend Sebastian Betz actually built the About You cloud from scratch, and also like the whole About You shop. I think like you quite have a few things in parallel. He has a different approach on the cloud though. So I think you just get services as a customer. Would you, if you were starting again from scratch, would you do it in a similar way from your today's perspective?
Yeah, yes. So for my new company, ROQ Technology, I did it exactly this way.
Good answer.
Yeah. It depends on what you want to achieve. So for Spryker is a e-commerce platform for very advanced use cases, and these are use cases that you cannot. I mean, you can solve them partially, but there's always custom modifications needed, and this is something which you cannot really offer with a SaaS solution. So a SaaS solution is telling you, this is the way I work, and you can build a front end. But you cannot change it fundamentally. For example, you cannot change the way the catalog is working. So let's say you build a marketplace where every product has a different stock per location or per merchant. This is something that you cannot do with a SaaS platform, and this is not in the database schema already. You cannot put that as a plugin on top or something. There's just no way to build it. And Spryker can be extended, that it can solve any kind of problem. This is exactly the value add of that architecture, that you can build whatever you like and can reuse existing functionality from Spryker. So in this,
well, I agree, but also I agree, but disagree partly. So I mean, it would be possible, but it's in a way depends really on your structure and your architecture, and it might be very, 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 very complex if you don't have.
I give you an extreme example. So the About You cloud, I do not know exactly the technology here, but I know it's a SaaS, like maybe close to commerce tools. So and probably it's a really good fit for people operating fashion companies, because it fits probably to the fashion use case. But imagine you build an international trading platform for electronic parts. There's a Spryker shop called Source Engine, and that shop is selling little parts like transistors and these things. And it has a catalog of 600 million products, which is sold by several dozen suppliers. So on each of these products and supplier combination, you have a price. So you can imagine how many prices information you have. And then customers do not browse a shop. What they do is they upload a bill of material, so it's an Excel sheet, and then the shop is automatically calculating the prices for these. And this is something which requires a different data model, different technologies. And that's something which I think you cannot build on any existing e-commerce platform except for Spryker, because Spryker allows you to reuse a lot of things which are common in your use case. There's also checkout, there's still payment, there's this and this, but some parts need to be adopted. And this way that you can adopt it so extremely, this is a big plus of Spryker. And that's why I think it really depends on the use case. I did this at Spryker for 4 years. And I had a really, really good time there as building the initial architecture, creating and training the initial core team, being part of the pilot projects, helping with sales. I was also involved into the first funding round and so on. So it was a very amazing time for me.
But you are more of a builder, right? You like building stuff and maybe not so much than operating it for 10 years. Is that true?
It's partially true. So I'm a hands-on CTO. So I think I'm quite good in the first years of a startup. So when there's greenfield, when architecture needs to be created, when technologies need to be decided, when the first team members need to be hired. Spryker reached a point when it was more like keep the application compatible with existing customers, which reduces the architecture freedom. You cannot make fundamental changes when 100 customers, 1,000 customers are operating. No way, because you will create backward compatible breaks. And also the Spryker team is quite large now. So this was not exactly fitting to my skills. And Spryker had a VPE, Sergei Bratsnikov, who was much better fit for this role. And in the same moment, there was one customer of Spryker, Metro AG, created a large system, and they needed my skills. And that's why it was an easy decision that, okay, I think I did my job at Spryker. If I continue here, probably I cannot give such a big value add. And there's Sergei, so there is somebody already in place who can do that part much better than I can do. And so I go to Metro and have Metro AG to launch a very large B2B shop in Russia, Romania. That's what I did in 2019. That was also a very interesting time for me. A completely different setup, large company, not a startup anymore. I was there as a freelance consultant, and very interesting learnings for me as well.
And then you already mentioned ROQ. Which problem do you solve there?
Let me introduce it like this. So after I left Metro, I took half year off and spent some time into consideration what I should do next. I looked into several startup ideas, software as a service ideas. So, for example, I considered to build a messaging service for craftsmen that they can digitalize their business and or centralize their communication. However, I looked into several dozen of business ideas. None of these ideas fit to my skills, and I didn't find a good idea. I'm a developer, so I was always looking into how would I build this? So if I would decide to create this startup now, how would I implement this? And I was looking for something like a shop system, so something that can help me to launch my idea very quickly, because there was a lot of functionality that I need to implement that has nothing to do with a business idea. And interestingly, there was no such platform for non-e-commerce cases. So for e-commerce, there's a lot of systems. You can use Spryker, you can use a Shopify. If you're very brave, you can also use a Magento. But if you build something which is not e-commerce, then there's nothing like this. So let's imagine you build the next car sharing service. How would you start? You would probably start by selecting a programming language, selecting the frameworks, selecting the technologies. You would probably discuss, do I use React or Vue? Or in the backend, do I use PHP or Ruby or Node.js? And you would start on a low level. In e-commerce, you evaluate a shop system, but outside of e-commerce, you start from scratch. And then you build a lot of functionalities that are quite common. So you need to build user management so that users can register, password forgotten feature, single opt-in, etc. You build a file upload again. You deal with payment providers again. You need to think about subscription model. You need to think about an invoice system. You need to think about UI elements. You need to think about where do I host it, on a ROQ or AWS or GCP or wherever. So you start to reinventing a lot of wheels. And that annoyed me because I said, no, it doesn't matter if you build what kind of web application I build. It doesn't matter if I build a software as a service startup or if I build an enterprise level web application. I will always need the same basic features. And this was the idea. Okay, let's build a platform that holds all these common ground, that holds all these 10, 20, 30 features that you always need when you build a web application. Let's build a platform that always takes care for the infrastructure hosting part. And let's build a platform that gives you all the third-party providers integration that you need anyway. So everybody needs integration with Twilio, always. Everyone needs integration with a payment provider. Everyone needs integration with Google Analytics or with SendGrid. It's always the same. And why don't we build a suite that holds all of this together? I was working close with the CTO of ROQ Internet, Tim Niemeyer. He's now my co-founder. So he also liked that idea a lot. We decided, okay, there's obviously a niche in the market. That platform does not exist. There's nothing that helps startups or large companies to build web applications. So let's build this platform. Let's solve this problem.
But isn't there like a bit of open source available? Like, I don't know, Laravel. I mean, you're from the PHP world. I myself am from the Rails world. And there's, for example, Jumpstart Rails, where you have like everything ready, prepared, payments, multi-tenancy accounts, authentication, invoicing, announcements, blah, blah. Doesn't that exist?
Yeah, it exists on the framework level, yes. Mm-hmm. But it does not. But when you build from scratch, you use existing frameworks, you use existing third-party providers. So you would not build a payment provider from scratch. And you maybe use Auth0 for authentication. You don't build this from scratch. But this is how people do it today. And then a web application takes a few hundred days until it can be launched. And we start on a higher abstraction level. So what we give away when it's done is a suite which is working out of the box completely. So you can deploy it on our infrastructure, and it gives you like an empty application that contains everything except your own business logic. So it's a much, much better start. Of course, under the hood, we're also using the existing frameworks. So we're also not building all of this from scratch. But the idea is we put that together in a very thoughtful way. We think about all the non-functional concerns. So our system will have high code quality, will be scalable, performance, security, etc. Everything of this will be there out of the box. So you get your project much, much faster. You will spend less money because you don't need to build all of this. And you will get it in better quality because what we can build now is better what you can build as an MVP in short amount of time and with small money. So, and this is the idea. So our offering is our USPs is actually compared to from scratch development, you get it faster, you get it cheaper, you get it better. So, and I think that's a quite good sales argument. Some people then say, oh yes, but I can also use a no-code platform like Bubble.io, where I can put the entire application together without coding. And we say, yes, that's possible. And this makes totally sense for prototypes or for internal applications. But for serious business models, this is not an option. You do not want to limit your flexibility by the capabilities of such a platform. So you want to have the full freedom of a programming language, but you do not want to reinvent all the wheels. That's exactly what we will offer with ROQ technology.
Well, there's like Firebase, for example, from Google, but it's more focusing on app development and so on, right?
Firebase is a use case when you build a mobile app and you do not want to think about a backend. This is quite nice for apps. But so with ROQ, we are focusing enterprise companies, so mid or large companies, so companies with revenue higher than 100 million euros, doing digital projects. And for these kind of companies, Firebase is not an option. So it's like you're building a large shop on Shopify. Yes, you could do that, but it's not the right technology. So we are facing more serious, more advanced projects.
And end user facing, right? So no internal tools. I mean, I love, for example, Airtable for internal tooling, but that's not what you aim for, right?
No. We are. It's for public. It's actually, the idea is our customers are companies that doing their business offline so far, that they digitalized internally using ERP systems, but they did not digitalize their relationship to customers. And they need to build very advanced solutions, connect them with their internal systems. And for this, something like Airtable is not an option. So for example, one of our pilot customers is Helm AG. That's a chemistry pharma company from Hamburg. It's a company doing several billion euro revenue per year. And what we did is we created an application so that their customers, which are also large companies, can do their business with them via website, not via personal meetings anymore. And we just started with this project. It's a large project. It takes time. It also takes people internally need some time to grow the idea. Hey, yes, we did this for the last 100 years. We did it offline, but now it's time to do it online. So it's a bigger project, but this is exactly our target group. So the German hidden champions or international hidden champions, actually, we want to roll out globally, who want to or must digitalize their business, their core business. And for this audience, for this target group, Airtable is not an option, to be honest.
Obviously.
Yeah.
So
and they are quite lost because they have no real alternative. I mean, usually, they cannot build from scratch because they don't have IT team. They can go to agencies, but it's always hard to tell agency what they should do because they don't really know exactly. So, we give them a solution. We say, okay, with us, you start higher than 0%. You start at 50% progress. We also guide you a bit through the development process, and then with us you can realize your projects much better.
So are you going to sell your product? I think it's like pretty much in the making, and a lot is like still in progress. Are you planning to sell your product then through agencies in long term and through development partners as you did with Spryker, or are you planning to build like an enterprise sales team and do all the heavy lifting yourself?
We do pilot projects on our own because we also want to learn from these projects. And our platform is not ready for self-service usage. So we do that at the moment. But we know that this is a not scalable business model. We are not an agency. And also compared to an agency, we do not have customer references. So we are not, it's something, we're not in that market. We do that initially with a few customers. But the idea is that we want to sell software and operate software. And then the realization is done either by the customer itself or we're agency or solution partner. We will build up a network here later on. So right now, our focus is on building our version 1 of our platform in the next, not sure, 6 months, 9 months, let's see. And then we do more pilot projects, and then we will look into this network idea. For now, it doesn't really matter for us who will do the project in the future. That's a decision that we will do later on. We try to keep that open. We had some agency already asking us if they can cooperate, if they can do projects. They also see that we have interesting customers, but that's just too early. So we do not want to go super fast. So we're not interested in building some large company in 12 months. So we want to build a sustainable software vendor solving a real problem. And it's totally fine for us if that takes a few years.
And your clients will all have a vendor login then, right? So there's no way operating the tool on their own. So it's a cloud-based thing. They have to then pay you forever and be logged in forever, or how's that gonna be?
Yeah, we're selling functionalities that we also operate on our side, and then the project need to build their part on their own, or we do it, or partner do that, and also operate on their own. So we're providing a hosting platform here for them that they can easily operate, but that's not mandatory. So their own business logic and their own data is always on their side. It's running on we're using GCP on their GCP account, but they can also move it to some other place. And then they only use our APIs for the common functionality. They can also replace these APIs over time. So there is a migration part to get rid of us. And we do not block that. It's totally fine. If somebody wants to do that, it's possible. Some customers demand that. Fine. We think that nobody will ever do that, because why would you spend time in rebuilding all the basic functionality just to get rid of us? And probably the result will be not good, because our solution is probably better than whatever you can do on your own. It's better to invest that time and budget into building features that differentiate your business. So it's probably better to put that money somewhere where you can generate revenue. It doesn't really make sense if you rebuild, for example, file handling on your own, because our solution is working fine. But still, we expect some people will do that, and that's fine. We do not want to discuss that too much upfront, that this is not possible. It's a valid approach. We just think it won't happen often, because our solution is good. It won't be too expensive. So we want to remove all the reasons why people could do that. Mm-hmm. But of course, there will always be a CTO who says, no, I want to build it on my own. My code is better than others.
That's what CTOs tend to do a lot, right?
Yeah. Yes. So it's fine. We expect that. And we do not want to discuss it too much. So we'd say it's fine. You can start with us. You have advantage at the beginning. And later on, if you think it makes sense, if you have too many engineers, feel free to replace the basic features. No worries.
So getting a bit more technical here, you also implemented that all in Node.js instead of PHP, right? And you're like a PHP guy. Why did you do that?
In the last 20 years, I used mostly PHP. I'm also do Java and Perl and other programming language. Spryker was implemented in PHP because PHP is, for e-commerce, it's the right language, because most developers with e-commerce experience are PHP developers. That's because of Magento and Oxid and other shop systems that existed before. For web applications, PHP is a bad choice, I think, because web application happens mostly in the UI and the front end, and there is no PHP. So you have to have JavaScript anyway. And when you have to deal with JavaScript anyway, then it totally makes sense to use JavaScript on the backend side as well, because the productivity of the team is heavily affected by the amount of programming languages that you use. Of course, if you mix programming languages, then you will have groups of team members who are expert in this or that, and these groups don't like each other. They don't go into lunch with each other. There will be a JavaScript group, and there will be a PHP group, and maybe a Ruby group, and so on. That's why I think it makes more sense to decide for one approach. Either everything is JavaScript, or you render everything on the server side. You can also do it with PHP and Ruby, and there are ways to do that. But I think the much, much better technology is using JavaScript, front and back end. So it's the same programming language. It's Node.js in the back end. It's React and Next.js on the front end. And on the mobile app, we're using React Native. So we can even use the same framework in the mobile and web application. So we reduce the amount of languages and frameworks. I think that's a big plus for us, and also a big plus for our customers, because every engineer is a full stack developer, because everybody can do both sides. Of course, some people are more specialized here and there. That's totally fine, but at least they speak the same language. So there's no language barrier anymore on the team. So people can easily commit code everywhere. Mm. There's no big onboarding time because somebody has learned a new programming language, etc. We can even share some libraries. So you can have the same validation library in the front end and also in the back end side. So you avoid duplicated code.
So that's also your answer on would you prefer microservices or monoliths these days, right? If they are the same language, then it's all good. Or what would be your answer?
This is an interesting question. So microservices solve a problem, right? And you should use it when you have the problem. So when the problem is that your team is very large and you cannot really have every people working on the same place, then breaking it into services makes totally sense, right? You have 1,000 engineers, you cannot work in a single application. That wouldn't work. Or if your application is not homogeneous, so it has a lot of parts that are isolated, then building all of this into one application is the wrong design decision. So, and that's why I think you should always think, which problem do I solve? And then building a modular application or a microservice, which one is better? You can also mix it. You can have a larger application with some microservice around. And then if you build services, then you can do it in a good way or in a bad way. And I think a good way is build everything in the same language. You can still do an exception if it makes sense. So if it makes sense to build some service in Python because you want to use some framework, totally fine, you can do that. But I think you should not leave that freedom to all the teams, because then you will have a big zoo of technology, of languages and frameworks and versions, and this is chaos. So I think you can also have a proper microservice architecture when everybody's using the same programming language and the same frameworks. This is what we do. So we have right now, I think, 10 services on our side. They all run. We operate them from a mono repository. We deploy them on different containers in Google Cloud Run. And we're using an API gateway in front of it. So we have a federated graph. So we're not exposing all the GraphQL endpoints of our services. I would say it's a proper architecture. And this way, the downsides of microservices are solved. The risks are mitigated. We still sometimes struggle a bit from having all these databases. Sometimes it would be nicer to have one big database. Sometimes you want to join two tables which are on different databases, and that's not possible. So we see sometimes the limitations, but generally, you can do microservice pretty good. For our customers, it's usually not needed. So most web applications that our customers are building are not complex enough, are not large enough to justify microservice architecture. Then sometimes having a single application or having a bunch of applications, like 2-3 applications, is totally fine. But they should be modular, of course. It should not be monolithic. It should be modular.
Is there any starter you provide to your clients as well? Like, for example, the front end stack could be something you provide as a starter, so that there's already authentication and payment somewhere integrated, or?
Yes, we provide an open source boilerplate application that contains a React web application and a Node.js backend, and all our features are pre-integrated. It has a nice UI, and people can start it. It can also be deployed. So that means the idea is that our customers can have a walking skeleton. So on the very first day. So instead of on the first day discussing about technology, they can deploy something the first hours of the project. They have something online and which they can improve. I think this is our main goal. So something which is opinionated from technology point of view. So we made some technology decisions that people then have to use. If they don't like this, they can still use our platform without our boilerplate. But if they use it, they have a huge speed advantage. They start on a working application which can do everything except the business logic you want to have on your own for your own business model. Yeah. On the back end, we're using Nest.js. That's a modular Node.js framework. It's really, really nice. So it scales very well when you build larger applications. And then, of course, we have all the best practices like GraphQL. We have a proper ORM in place. We're using a relational database, Postgres, etc.
Okay, I'm smiling a bit because like I know Nuxt.js or Next.js and server-side rendering and all those modern things. Like from your, let's say, old school, the old school Fabian perspective, does that all make sense? I mean, it's quite like a big complexity you introduce. Like with server-side rendering and just having a layer in between, that is essentially just there for Google or mostly there for Google. Does that make sense from your old Fabian is writing code in PHP perspective, where you just render pages that are stateless? Is it is the state in the front end, is it worth the effort?
Depends on what you're building. If you build some kind of static page that shows content, then it's not worth. So then you can just use PHP or Ruby or whatever, Python, and build the HTML on the server side. You can still put a bit of dynamic content, maybe use jQuery or something, and here you go, you're done. It's solved. So the complexity is low. You have one application serving HTML, you're done. And that's still good. I think for most websites, this is still a valid use case. For advanced web applications where people are interacting on the front end, you will need something better. And better means you use a good framework. We decided for React, and React alone is not enough. So you also need state management. We use Redux. That was something which I need to learn, to be honest. I did not know about all of this before we started ROQ. So I also had my own learning experience. I needed in total 3 months to learn the entire JavaScript stack from PHP to JavaScript. It took me, it's a lot, to be honest. 3 months full time. But now I know all the stuff. I had no clue why we need state management in a React application. Why? That didn't exist in PHP. So, and React and Redux is still not enough. You need something else. You need some structure. You need some way to have pages, and also the back button of the browser should work. And server-side rendering, you need some time. That's why you use Next.js. So this is the main stack. React, Redux, Next.js. And this somehow makes sense. Yes, there's a learning curve. So people need to understand this. But that is a default stack. That means there are thousands and thousands of developers in the market who know exactly that stack. That's why it's not a big problem. It feels somehow weird if you build some feature and then you need to write reducers and slices. So it feels like you're building some code which is not exactly the use case, because it feels like you're a bit far away from writing the actual HTML. But it all makes sense. It's done by very, very good software engineers. It makes somehow sense.
Somehow
sense, yeah.
Because there are like a lot of pros and cons, right? I know, like I once spoke to David Heinemeier Hansen, for example, the inventor of Ruby on Rails, who built, I think, Basecamp and Hey.com, both on like purely server-side rendered technologies, and it feels like a very rich application still. So I like every once in a while get the feeling that it's like mostly the personal fun of the engineers writing React instead on discovering new technologies, and not purely business value. If I'm really honest, like let's look at Amazon, for example. Is Amazon an SPA? No. Do they have a faceted search? Yes. Does it feel good? Yes. So I think like the question is really, is it the engineer who wants this, or is it the business that requires it, right?
Yeah, I was before we decided for technology, I was also looking into Ruby on Rails, and they have this nice thing where you can react on JavaScript events on the backend side. So you can write everything in Ruby, and you still have a kind of single page application at the front end, but you do not need to write JavaScript. I was looking into this, and I was deciding against it because our customers build user interfaces that will be used by users on the browser and also on the mobile app. And for mobile app, there is no server-side rendering HTML. It doesn't exist. So you need to have it running on the mobile phone.
If you're always online, then it's there. But if not,
but it doesn't work. So a proper web application needs to run on the client side. That's why I think it makes sense. And the complexity is high, the effort could be high, but I think the results are really good. And but I totally with you. I think not for it's some use cases. For some use cases, it will be overwhelming. And I mean, I just described the front end part. There's also the back end part. We're using GraphQL as our main API approach, and so you have to deal with Apollo client, Apollo server. And with microservice, you have to think about how you put all these GraphQL graphs together with a federated graph. And then you have to think about how you do authentication, how you do authorization, so ACL. How do you persist data and what kind of database? You use a type ORM, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the stack has several layers. It's a lot of boilerplate code that you need to write. That's why the first thing that we did, we implemented a code generator. So you can draw your data model, and then our code generator will generate the entire code that is needed to have a proper, fully working API, including all the demo data and fake data. But it makes sense. So this stack makes totally sense. It's a super nice separation of concerns, and you can build really, really powerful applications. I think I wouldn't. So if I start a new startup and I have only €5,000 budget, then probably this would not be the stack that I'm using. But if I build an enterprise project and I have 500,000, then it has to be done like this, because this is an industry standard. This is the best practices. There's a reason why it's all like this. And yeah, it's also, otherwise you won't find, you will run into technical limitations very quickly, and you also will not find developers. Nobody wants to work with an application that is implemented on, Stand framework or an old version of Rails, or I think, you will have problems if you do that.
Yeah, right. I think attracting developers these days is much easier in Node.js, right? Potentially.
Yeah, it is. There are a lot of people there. It's hard to find good backend engineers for Node.js. Just because you're able to write Node.js doesn't mean that you know about good software programming principles. So that's why sometimes I interview people who are more on Java side or PHP side, because they know, for example, what an interface is for, or what an abstract class is. If you ask a JavaScript developer, they won't give you a good answer.
Yeah.
So that's why I think we need a good mix of JavaScript experts, and then train them a bit into good coding practices, but also people from other languages who know these practices. They only need to learn JavaScript. And yeah, that's the approach how we build our team. JavaScript developers are often front-end guys, even if they write Node.js code. But this is something, it's just a question of time. I think this stack is a very, very powerful, good stack. And Node.js is also blazing fast. So I'm from PHP world, I'm not used to fast programming languages, but Node.js is like 10 times faster. So I tried it out. I wrote scripts calculating Fibonacci numbers. It's 10 times faster on average. So I think it has almost the speed of Java. And that's why I like this language a lot. And it's also much, much faster than Python. That's why even if I would do BI, I would probably consider doing it with Node.js, because it's just much, much, much faster.
Okay. One thing I heavily dislike about Node.js is the fact that there's a lot of re-platforming happening in the Node.js ecosystem. So whenever I touch it again, I see, okay, there's like a new top-notch build tool that you have to use these days, or there's a new front-end framework that you rather use instead of, I don't know, Vue.js or React. And that kind of drives me nuts a bit, to be honest, because that can keep you busy, just moving from one technology to another all day long, right?
You're right. This was the reason why I ignored JavaScript for 20 years. I started learning it in 1999, and then I stopped learning it because it was so bad. Then it was changing, Scriptaculous, jQuery, and stuff coming and going away. I think it's much more mature now, and it's stabilized. So React, for example, is in the market now since how many years? 5 years? I'm not sure. So and Facebook is behind it. So I don't think that it will go away very quickly. There may be a new. There's something called Svelte, which I never looked at, but I heard it more often. There could be more stuff coming, yes, but I think it's a safe bet. On the backend side, there's a big gap. So we're using this Nest.js, which is a good framework, modular framework, and I think it's now the kind of industry standard, but it's far, far away from, for example, from Laravel. Mm-hmm. So Laravel ecosystem and technology is 100 times larger, and I think that's missing. So there's no Laravel or Django or Rails for Node.js. I think this is something which will come for sure. It's an obvious gap in the market. It's obvious. It's not even niche. I think it could be at some day some big player will go and grab it. Yeah. So I think Nest.js is maintained by one guy. Yeah. I think someday there will be a larger company. It could be Google, Facebook, whatever, and put the flagship framework there. It's really, really missing. You deal with a lot of small tools, small libraries. You need to maintain a big package JSON. And with Laravel, this is much nicer. But Laravel, it's only for server side, so it doesn't really help you for building nice front ends.
So
no mobile apps.
So from your, you have a vast experience in different fields and different areas, and you kind of are very hands-on still. From the years of experience you had, are there any key learnings you would like to pass on to our listeners?
My key learning is you should first from developer perspective, right? As a developer, you should focus decide on which technology you want to focus on. Some people say a good developer knows a lot of languages and a lot of technologies. This is true for the older ones, but it's impossible to do that when you're in your 20s. So that's why I think decide for your stack. It could be Ruby on Rails, could be Laravel, could be Node.js, whatever. Decide for your stack and then dig into and become expert. This will take 5 years. So do not try to know everything. No way. Each stack is complicated. Each stack is large. Become expert in one stack, and you can be very, very strong and earn good money. And then when you're in parallel, you should learn the basics. So and what are the basics? Basics is object-oriented programming. So you know what a class is, what an interface, what an abstract class is. You know how to structure a class, how a function. You read the clean code book from Uncle Bob, for sure. It's a 2-hour read. Of course, you read that. You know, of course, solid principles. Not only you heard of it, you know exactly what these 5 principles. It's just 5 principles. It takes you maybe half a day to learn it. Of course, you know that. Of course. I'm asking it in every interview. You may know the package principles. So learn the basics. And there's for sure much more. And I think this is so valuable. You know what an algorithm is. You know what a data structure is. You're able to you know the big O notation of algorithms. These are basics. You learn them in university, but you can also learn them on your own. Do that. Learn your IDE. Learn how Git is working. So know the basics. And
I forgot 12.
Otherwise, you're just a coder.
Apps. 12-factor apps.
12-factor apps, correctly. Otherwise, this is difference of a coder who's just able to produce code. And a serious software engineer. Because if you don't know these basics, you will never become really, really senior level.
Thanks a lot. And one more question. I think you're a guy who also loves tools, and or at least that's what I feel. Do you have like a tool? Like I have that every once in a while, like Airtable. A tool that you recommend to everyone and you drive everyone nuts with because you recommend it all of the time? Do you have something like that you like just love right now?
Yes, I have such a tool. Let me explain a bit. So when I design architecture or software, I'm always start with a data model. So for me, the data model is the most important thing. This has to be right. The code we can change. There could be bugs, but the data model is extremely hard to change. It has to be proper. It's the basic of everything. And it's really weird that people are not visualizing data models. And I'm using a tool, it's called Schema. It's drawing very, very nice data models based on existing databases. So you can just plug it on your existing database. It will reverse engineer the structure and give you a nice entity relationship diagram. And that tool is for free. So everybody can use it. It's a brilliant tool. I used MySQL Workbench before, but then I switched to Postgres. This tool was gone. I even used MySQL Workbench when it was named differently before MySQL acquired that, before Sun acquired that tool. So, and I really don't understand why people are not visualizing their data models. So I'm always doing this. I'm always, in every workshop, you will see me drawing data models with a drawing tool like Glyphy or something. And then after deployment, I'm using Schema to check if everything is right, everything is accordingly. The idea. Yeah. Schema.
That's a good tip. Schema. So then I still have like a little surprise for you as a closing question. I actually bought a used car. It's a Tesla Model S, first generation, and it was one famous guy selling it to me. It was Oliver Samwer, and it actually has a hidden Easter egg feature that Elon Musk personally handcrafted in. It's a time machine button, and we now can step into that car and ride from Berlin to Hamburg. And I actually on our way, let's imagine I hit that time machine button, and it brings us back to the year 2009 when you just started as a senior developer working at Rocket Internet in that like sweatshop, working day and night. And we observed yourself for a while. And you have the chance to whisper something into young Fabian's ears. What would it be?
What would it be? I'm sure I had good answers sometimes because I reflected all of this and let me just think about. So what should it be? I think I worked a bit too much at that time, so I could have spent more time with my family. I already had kids at that time. This is something I would tell. I would tell me for sure. I think I should have asked for shares at Rocket Internet. Yeah, probably that's my biggest mistake. I didn't ask Ollie for shares. All these e-commerce companies. Yes, that's what I would tell me.
I think it's
work less, ask for more.
It's a quite common scheme that techies maybe are not greedy enough sometimes, or don't see their own value.
You asked me before about advice, so that's what I told you. My advice for developers. My advice for everyone else is ask for shares. So,
yeah, that's a good advice. I think it fits the typical CTO very nicely, because you often see people from like a business university sticking together, the team of two, and then searching for a CTO, right?
Yeah. Ask for shares.
That's good.
Take 20% less salary, ask for shares.
That's a good advice. So, Fabian, we could talk for hours, but yes. I think 1 hour and 10 is a good time for a podcast. Yes. Good length for a podcast. Thanks a lot for the discussion, and I hope we can continue it in the future. I would love seeing your tool in a way, like partly becoming open source, so that it is actually a platform that everyone could use. Let's see if that happens at a certain time. Maybe you can surprise us. Hope to see you again soon.
Thank you very much, Toby.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
And let's meet in person, hopefully, after Corona.
Yes, let's do that.
Bye-bye.